I've spent 18 years of my career working with Excel, and for the vast majority of those years, I've earned over 6 figures. So I've learned a thing or two about what works and what doesn't work so well. So in this video, I'm going to go through everything and I'm going to give you the best of what I've learned. Nothing is going to be held back. So let's go straight into it. Thing number one, there are 3 kinds of problems and only 4 ways to solve it. So broadly, everything that we do with Excel is characterized by 3 kinds of problems: tracking, analyzing, communicating. So tracking is we either take data feeds or we take human input. Analyzing is making sense of all of that. And then finally, communicating. That is where we take everything that we've got and we push it out to the wider world. We push it out to management and people who are interested. Now, those are typically the 3 things that we are trying to solve. And there are 4 ways that we can use Excel to solve that. We can either find our information, we can create logic to understand it, we can summarize our information, and fourthly, we are dealing with text-based information. So that's what I call the 4-3 rule that I have to deal with everything in Excel. Number 2, Excel has over the years just become bloated with more and more nonsense. 3D models, anyone? And that leads me on to number 3, which is Microsoft Excel's subscription model. It definitely has a lot of pros, but it's got a few cons as well. So let me explain to you what the cons are. Microsoft Excel are just adding more and more and more functionality to the product without actually adding value. All they're doing is creating way more what I call convenience formulas. So we originally had, Excel started out with a few dozen, then went on to a few hundred, and now it's bordering on like almost 1,000 different formulas and that do all kinds of very niche things. Now, the problem with that is that it's just created so much noise. And for people who are coming into Excel and using it new every day, we've got new people using Excel. To decipher the signal from that noise becomes more and more difficult and more complicated. And so what it really is doing is all this new functionality is not actually adding a great deal to the capability of Excel. It is simply adding so much that people are getting overwhelmed and they feel like Excel can do so many things and they don't know exactly what they should be doing. And so it creates this underlying anxiety. Number 4. One of the most important things that I've learned is that Excel ultimately is a tool of leverage. If you understand that and let it be a tool of leverage for you. What do I mean by leverage? Well, leverage is how the people in the corporate world, professionals like us who are doing analytical work, it is how we can be incredibly productive and do a lot, have big output with a small amount of input. And so we are churning numbers, we are doing analysis, we're creating reports, we're sending them out into the world, we're tracking, we've got all kinds of background processes that are going on. If you have strong formula skills, if you have strong automation skills, you can achieve way more than people who do not have that. And it's very much a sliding scale. If you are a supply chain analyst and you can do automation work, if you're a project analyst and you can do automation work, you can just do way more than people who don't have that. And so what that allows you to do is when you have a reputation for doing way more, you can go and do the senior roles and ultimately go towards management roles and ultimately increase your salary. But if you get hung up on Excel as a number crunching tool or just doing same work day in, day out and looking for shortcuts to help you become more efficient, you will never exploit Excel's ability to give you leverage. Number 5, one of the most important things that I've learned from working with Excel is that when you are able to create incredible insights and reports and communication artifacts, then you can ultimately become a trusted advisor. And that is the best thing that you can ultimately be in your career if you're working in an analytical capacity. And by a trusted advisor, I mean that you are working for someone who has some degree of significance, right? They're somewhere along the hierarchy and you are essentially their number 2 or there or thereabouts. Now, if you are the person who is bringing them information and insights so that they can make decisions, well, guess what? if they have that ambition, and ideally they will have that ambition, as they move up, they're going to take you up with them. And that has happened to me throughout my career, is I've aligned myself with good, ambitious people, and I'm happily being the number two. And for those people, I've been an absolute boon. I've been indispensable for them. And I've worked with people and we have a 1-2 punch. We have a solid understanding, and I provide them the information reliably, and they can trust what I've given them. And as they've gone up, they've taken me with them. As they've moved on to different work, they've taken me with them. And so being a trusted advisor is one of the most underrated things that you can do in your career. And Excel is the tool that you can do that with. Right, point number 6, Excel is ubiquitous. Now, how ubiquitous? Well, at the last count, there was somewhere between 750 million to 1 billion users of Excel. 1 billion, that's like, we're talking 1/8 of the human population. That is absolutely insane. So if you can rise above a lot of those users, if you can learn a skill set that such as automation, such as advanced usage of formulas, you're going to pretty much leapfrog. And what that allows you to do, it allows you to really pop in interviews. It allows you to pop when you're doing your work. It allows you to get noticed amongst all of your other contemporaries. So don't sleep on the fact that having Excel skills can really, really make you look good in a big sea of Excel users. Number 7. Excel VBA is still relevant. Yes, I said it. We're almost in 2025 and I said it. Excel VBA is still very, very relevant. Now, people go on about Power Query and they say, oh, Power Query is here. We don't really need to use Excel VBA anymore. Well, Power Query is amazing. I use it almost on a daily basis, but Power Query is predominantly what I call a pull automation, right? So you set up your inputs, you set up your data feeds, and then you can use that to consolidate and cleanse and appropriate your data before doing whatever else it is you need to do with it, whether it goes into a dashboard, whether it goes into a Power Pivot or whatever, right? Now, that's pulling. There is this whole other component of pushing data and information out to reports, slide packs, PowerPoint presentations, web sharing, all manner of pushing that needs to be done to your analysis once you've done it. So to this day, I heavily use PowerPoint VBA, I heavily use Excel VBA, and a lot of the information that I create and I work with comes from humans. And with the way that we get human information is by pushing out templates to them. And what do? We use VBA to make the templates. We push the templates out, and more often than not, even the pulling of that is easy with VBA. So we consolidate that stuff with VBA, and then occasionally we can use Power Query to even consolidate that and cleanse it and do all that good stuff. But do not sleep on Excel VBA, still relevant. Point number 8. In the last 10 years or so, there's been a lot of functionality that's been added to Excel, and especially more recently, as I alluded to, since it's moved to the subscription model, it seems to be getting a new thing after new thing after new thing. But let me tell you this, all right? Having used this, let me tell you the biggest and most powerful additions that have been made to Excel in the last 10 years. And people will probably, challenge me and say, well, I don't agree with that, or what about this? No problem. But let me tell you, it's been Power Query, Power Pivot, and the dynamic array formulas. Those have been the 3 biggest wins for Excel because of how impactful that they are. Power Query and Power Pivot allow Excel to work with much bigger volumes of data. Power Query specifically is great. It's a point and click tool for arranging and sorting and consolidating data. Power Pivot, it can do insane amounts of number crunching with high volume numbers. Now, not everybody needs to use Power Pivot because of the high, the sheer volume of data that is beneficial to working with it. Most people do not work at those volumes of data. Most people's data typically tends to be under 5,000 rows of data, and therefore you don't really need it, but it's there. Now, the dynamic array formulas are massive. I love them because I was a heavy user of array formulas, which is the Control Shift and Enter formulas where one-to-many cell calculations are going on. So specifically filter, sort, and unique, they've been game changers for me and many of the people that I work with. Okay, so I touched on this. Number 9, Excel has got loads of convenience formulas, things like text join and group pivot by and God knows what. As far as I'm concerned, they're noise, okay? I'm not a fan of them. I still use the classics. I still use the ifs and the VLOOKUPs and the XLOOKUPs and the countifs and SUMIFs. A big part of the reason why I continue to use them, partly it's because I'm just so used to using them, but having even tried these convenience formulas out, I still believe that working with the basics, when you think about the basics, it allows you to break problems down in the way that you want to break them down, logically, step by step. And when you start working with prompts and whatnot to help speed up your work, then breaking things down up and putting that into, prompting AI around those is going to allow you to get much better results from AI as well. So I'm not a big fan of these convenience formulas. Massive noise has been added to the Excel product as far as I'm concerned. Number 10, breaking down problems. That might not sound like an Excel specific thing, which is true, but a lot of the work that we do in Excel needs to be broken down before we can actually start using Excel to model it. Now, in order to break a problem down, we need to have a firm understanding of what the requirements are. Now, requirements gathering is very much a people sport. It is a staple of analytics and being an analyst and doing analytical work. And so it all begins from asking the right questions. And so for me, this is where Excel, the technical aspects of Excel meet the human aspects of the work that we are trying to do. So don't sleep on good requirements gathering and breaking it down before we can even start using formulas and functions and whatnot to solve the problems. Number 11, Excel shortcuts. I am not a fan of Excel shortcuts. How could I possibly say such a thing? I've been railing against Excel shortcuts for over a decade. Now, what is wrong with shortcuts? Everyone and their mum and their dog uses shortcuts. This is what I have against shortcuts, is that when people use shortcuts, they overly get reliant on shortcuts. And what happens is that they just end up doing manual work. You just end up doing more and more manual work. You're a manual laborer, like, you're shoveling coal. That's how I was referred to it, shoveling coal. But you're not working in the coal mines here. You're working in a corporate job. Now, Excel is this incredible tool that can give you leverage. So if you continually find yourself using shortcuts day after day, doing the same work again and again, and it's just repetitive, and you pride yourself on the speed at which you can do it because you're using shortcuts, then you are not using leverage. You are the leverage. That is the paradigm that you have to move away from, is that you can use Excel as a tool of leverage, or Excel can use you as a tool of leverage. So I'm going to have a separate video entirely about this, and I will dig more deeper into it because people still troll me about this, and you're very welcome to troll me about this. I appreciate any engagement that I get from you. But Excel shortcuts are good for your job, bad for your career. Number 12, your Excel skills, your Excel artifacts and outputs, they are a tool of networking. Don't sleep on this at all. When people think of networking, they think, I'm going to go and go to this party. I'm going to go on LinkedIn and just have, go and make 10 connections every day. I'm going to go and meet people for coffee. And there is value in all of that stuff. But there is another kind of networking, and I call it value networking. That networking is a form of sharing your work. It is, how can you share your desensitized work? How can you let people know who you are by the impact of the work that you have done? And so the way I've done this throughout my career is I've either shared tools and templates with people in adjacent departments that I've worked in. I've shared desensitized tools, templates, work that I've done with people in other companies, people who I know or know through other people. And what this has done is this has opened up doors for me throughout my career, throughout my 18 years of working with Excel. It's been one of my secret weapons from moving from company to department and getting, promoted along the way in the process. Number 13, there is an optimum level of skills that will benefit you in your career when you work with Excel. What do I mean by optimum? Now, optimum is slightly different for everyone. but within a certain window. Now, as I alluded to already, you want to concern yourself with tracking, you want to concern yourself with analysis and communicating and summarizing, right? Those are the things that you want to do. Anything beyond that is most likely not going to help you if you are an average, let's say, non-technical professional, right? Non-technical, I mean that you're not a developer and you're not an Excel specialist VBA developer, right? Which most people who use Excel are not. Now, let me hark back to earlier on in my career, when I was just a few years into my career, and I was surrounded I was in banking, and I was surrounded by people who were very bespoke developers. Some were Excel developers, and some were doing Windows development and so forth. And they basically used to make me look bad. They used to make me feel bad. They said, oh, you can do a few things in Excel. You're not very good. I can do this, I can do that. Why don't you learn this and learn that? That's going to help you. And for a while I took that advice. Guess what? I got good at things like shell scripting and building OLAP cubes and stuff that doesn't even exist anymore in this day and age. And guess where it got me? Nowhere. It got me nowhere. What I found, when you get overly technical, you're in that area now where you're solving really niche problems that don't have a lot of impact. But the amount of skills that you need to solve those problems, those really niche problems that don't have a lot of impact, you need a lot of skills. You need a strong skill set. You start doing things for the sake of it. And what I found with those people and their personalities is that they were very technical people. They were extremely introverted people. They didn't necessarily want to go and engage. They were the sort of people who wanted to just really sit behind their desk, sit behind their computer and have minimal interaction. Now, within a few years of me realizing this and just moving away from that kind of work and going more down a different route, much more a vocational route, what happened was I was out promoted. I was way more senior than them, and I was out earning all of them. And when I made this point to them, they just weren't interested. They couldn't get it. And so some people will never get that point. But the point I'm making is that there is an optimum level of technical skills that will help you with Excel. Going beyond that will not help you. Where you want to shift your attention to in your career is going deeper in your role, deeper in your sector, deeper in a department, and having broader knowledge combined with those Excel skills. That's going to take you way further. Number 14, I haven't talked about Excel skills in particular at all, but I'm just going to straight up give you my absolute favorite formulas at this point in my career. And that would be if, VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP, COUNTIFs, SUMIFs, text formulas such as len, left, right, mid, search, love those. And then of course the dynamic array formulas, which are filter, sort, and unique. I love those. And last but not least, if error, for cleaning up all the nonsense. Number 15, pivot tables are optional. Now, I've had a love-hate relationship with pivot tables over the years. Earlier on in my career, I realized pivot tables had massive limitations, and I just point blank refuse to use them, because 95% of the time, all you're doing with pivot tables can be achieved with COUNTIFs and SUMIFs. A lot of the time, the typical analytical professional is working with what I call small data. You're not working with huge volumes of data. Therefore, you don't necessarily need that. You just have to have your data, you just refresh it, and you can have lots of COUNTIFs and SUMIFs and make up dashboards and have preset formulas, and that can work wonders for you. Now, over the years, what I have noticed is that data has generally tended to increase over time. And so that is why in recent years, I have started using pivot tables more, because the biggest advantage of pivot tables is something called the pivot cache. The pivot cache is essentially, it takes a snapshot of data that you give to Excel, and it just stores it separately somewhere in memory. And the reason it does that is because it can then not rely on the back-end sheet calculations, which are slower. It puts it into a separate layer, where it can really rapidly, instantly do calculations on it. And that is the biggest advantage of working with pivot tables, is the pivot cache. But let me tell you this, and just to end on this point, pivot tables are optional. You can go very far in your career and your work without ever touching a pivot table. Number 16, speaking of small data, Excel is still king, queen and court jester of dealing with small data. So we're talking like 5,000 rows and below, maybe 10,000 rows, which is the vast majority of the data that exists within corporate organizations. Excel is still the best way to use it. Now, if you are going bigger than that, guess what? You can still do a lot with Excel. You can then start leveraging Power Query and especially Power Pivot to do all that crunching if you have to do that on a regular basis. Now, if you're bigger than that, then you probably want to start thinking about moving out of Excel entirely. And so then you want to start using actual bespoke databases. So things that are built in like SQL Server, maybe Mongo, Redshift, there's all kinds of databases out there. And then you want to have SQL, structured query language, to interrogate that data. Now, you don't always have to learn SQL, but you can learn some basic scripting. It's not terribly too difficult to get some basic SQL knowledge and to be able to do some basic fundamental querying on a data. But as I said, for the most part, you don't have to go outside Excel, and you shouldn't go outside Excel and add complexity where you just don't have to add complexity. Number 17, building on from the last point, the average person, the average corporate professional who uses Excel, and even more than the average, even above the average corporate person who uses Excel, can simply stay in Excel to do their work. Now, you get Power BI, people talk about Python, Tableau, and R, and all these other really great tools and technologies. They are good, but you just don't need them. The vast majority of people don't need them. And then you'll have trainers or bloggers or influencers saying, no, you should know Python. It's good to know Python. I call absolute BS. People like that, they haven't necessarily done the hard yards to go up in an organization. Therefore, their advice is unsolicited and it's absolutely poor, and it will send you down a rabbit hole that you just don't want to go down, and it will be completely unfruitful and unproductive for you. So don't do it. The vast majority of work can still be done within the confines of Excel. Finally, point number 18, again, seemingly not an Excel point, but very much something that I've learned from using Excel and making tons and tons of mistakes over time, which is that it's okay to make mistakes. It's absolutely okay. And you will make some catastrophic mistakes, and you will make some mistakes that will get you embarrassed. Hell, you might even make a mistake that will get you fired. But let me tell you something about mistakes, okay? Now, as much as I want this video to help you to make less mistakes, sometimes you just have to make the mistakes, because that is the most powerful way of internalizing what you've learned. Until you feel you've gone red-faced and you've gone embarrassed and you've cringed out a whole bunch of people that you work with, until you've had your manager call you in and your manager's manager call you in and ask, them asking you for a good reason why they should keep you, you might not ever learn the lesson. So don't ever worry about making mistakes. Learn them, internalize them, and become better and move onwards and upwards in your career. So I hope that has been useful for you. If you like that video and you're not already subscribed, what are you waiting for? There's going to be tons more awesome content like this.